Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Albert Chiu. South Korea, China, and Japan resumed trilateral meetings in May after a 4-year hiatus. The three national leaders initiated new discussions on free trade agreements and other areas. Meanwhile, the defense ministers of China and the U.S. met at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. What is new about all of this? Joining us today are Chien-huei, Academia Sinica Institute of European and American Studies Research Fellow, and Chen Fang-yu, Soochow University Assistant Professor in Political Science. A very warm welcome to both on the show. As we learned from the China-Japan-South Korea meeting, Chinese Premier Li Qiang met with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. Given the geopolitical tensions in East Asia, so how do you view the current situation between the three countries, Professor Wu?
I think we have to go back to for a bit longer, or at least 5 years, we see the difference between these three countries. And these three countries, they experienced the leadership, the shift of leadership, especially in South Korea and in Japan. And South Korea, it has changed from a more feudal China leadership back to a more favorable U.S. It is a significant change in terms of leadership in South Korea. And secondly, South Korea has long faced with a dilemma between security and economic ties. Economically, it relies heavily on China, but in security-wise, it relies heavily on U.S. This is how to manage its security interests and economic interests between U.S. and China. South Korea has long faced difficult issues. And the third point is, South Korea, in fact, it has, in the past 5 years, its economic interest in China has faced with a significant challenge due to U.S.-China trade war. I think this is the current situation, how these three countries, especially from the perspective of South Korea, I think this is the most important one. And the second point I want to make is how the U.S. mediating its alliance, especially its alliance in Asia-Pacific, in Indo-Pacific, how it managed to coordinate its most important allies, Japan and Korea. The two leaders, they visited the U.S., and U.S. has succeeded in convincing Japan to leave its export ban on semiconductor materials toward South Korea. And when Japan released its radiation waters into the oceans, in that case, South Korea did not complain. I think this is a very important signal how U.S. try to mediate these two allies.
Mm-hmm. So even though there is a three national leaders summit, between South Korea, Japan, and also China, but still there is an influence from the United States remains over there. Professor Chen, also, I wonder what's your primary observation of this summit, and if you will, could you elaborate more on this? The follow-up question is: has the original China-South Korea alliance against Japan now shifted to a Japan-South Korea alliance against China?
Well, in terms of national security, I think yes. So because in the past, Japan and South Korea has been in a very bad relationship because of the long strained by the historical disputes. However, under the mediation of the U.S., then they quickly just amend this relationship and form into an alliance especially on the national security issues. Especially they have the common threat from the North Korea, and also there's all concern about the stability of the Taiwan Strait. So that's the first. However, in terms of economy, then because there are more of the geopolitical factors comes in, so the U.S. now forming an alliance of the semiconductor industries to have some sanctions against China. So the U.S. have to cooperate with Japan and also Korea companies that they cannot ship their most advanced chips or other technologies to China. So the U.S. needs a cooperation here. So we see more of the alliance between U.S., Japan, and South Korea. So I think this summit is framed primarily on economic and social issues like climate change and the free trade. So they try to avoid to talk about the national security issue there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's a very sharp observation from you. But I also noticed that the news released from the summit did not mention any specific discussions about Taiwan at all. Does this indicate that Japan and South Korea are trying to be friendly to China? Did the three leaders try to frame this summit as a Northeast Asian issue only, Professor Wu?
I think it will be a surprise if a China issue, Taiwan issue is there. Because imagine China would not accept other countries interfering into Taiwan issues. And for Japan and to some degree to South Korea, they would not accept China's one China principle. Mm-hmm. So no, that's equivalent. No mention Taiwan issue at all is a basic stance between these three countries because they cannot reach on any agreement or consensus on this. But I want to point to another point is the defense minister of U.S., Japan, and South Korea in a side event or Shangri-La summit. They mentioned about Taiwan issues, and they reiterate the importance of stability and peace across Taiwan Strait, and they focus on a peaceful resolution of Taiwan issues.
And what about you, Professor Chen? Your observation about the no mentioning of Taiwan at all. What's your take on this?
Well, it's quite natural that they will not touch upon these controversial issues, especially for China. China will not allow, just like as Professor Wu mentioned, that China will not allow others to intervene. So I think they don't have to deal with Taiwan issues in this summit. But I also noticed that one day before the Trilateral summit, so Prime Minister Kishida met with Premier Li Qiang, and they did mention about the Taiwan issues, especially Mr. Kishida mentions that Japan do concern about the stability of Taiwan Strait. So yeah, they talk about this in the private meetings, but they think that there's a consensus that they will focus mainly on the economic issues here.
Okay. It is also reported that South Korean officials were the first to invite the other two countries to join a meeting. What is South Korea's incentive to do so? And also, I wonder, on the other hand, what is President Xi Jinping's attitudes and the PRC stance toward Japan and South Korea? Help us to those specific issues that have distanced Japan and South Korea from China. Professor Wu.
Okay, as I mentioned, South Korea is one of the countries who suffer most from the U.S.-China trade war. In the very beginning of U.S.-China trade war launched by Donald Trump, it was at that time it was widely regarded as Taiwan would suffer most. But fortunately, Taiwan benefited the most. But in terms of economic role still rising from the U.S.-China trade war, South Korea is actually the one who suffered most, given its huge investment and trade volume with China. So in terms of economic interest, South Korea has the incentive to mediate its economic partners. At the same time, it has also incentive to narrow down the gap between economic relations with China. On the other hand, security ties with U.S. And I think these are the incentives why South Korea they may want to have a strong coordination in Northeast Asia. From the perspective of CCP, again, when CCP or the PRC, when it is faced with big enemies, now it's U.S., they will seek support from either from Japan or South Korea or European countries. This is what the United Front the CCP is quite familiar with. So they coordinate or try to cooperate with regional partners in when U.S. pressure is strong. But again, if the U.S. pressure is less relaxed or lessened, then China would not feel the need to cooperate with Japan and South Korea.
Professor Chen, so what are the specific issues that have distanced Japan and South Korea from China, even though they seek sort of like consensus in the summits, but what else remain there, kind of distant the three countries from each other?
Well, I think the most important issue is about the territorial expansion of PRC, especially in East China Sea. Also, China is now allegedly helping North Korea directly, and South Korea is always pushing China to change their roles to the relationship with North Korea. However, China just does not want to respond to that. So basically, all three countries have the incentive to talk with each other to deal with their security concerns. However, they frame this as mainly economic issues, because economic issues may be the most important or easiest way to start the talk. So, but especially for China's in view, they have more incentive than other countries to break through the U.S. alliance here, because the U.S. has achieved to the Japan and South Korea alliance through a very difficult way, because in the past the two countries are really in a bad shape, but they now form an alliance in a very good relationship. So China is, I think they are very nervous. They have to break through this one by one, individual countries, so that they cannot be contained by the U.S. alliance.
Two of you just mentioned that the summit is purely for economic issue. Is it fair for anyone to argue that China now needs Japan and South Korea due to its severe economic downturn in the domestic Chinese society? And even we can argue that because there's a need for semiconductors for CCP to develop its military or even this competition in the race of AI with not only the United States but also China. So do China want to those kind of needs? So that's why China needs to make friends with Japan and South Korea again.
Yeah, when China feel the pressure from U.S. Heavily, then of course it would seek alliance and even its former rivals. So this can be seen when, of course, when Donald Trump was in power. In the PRC signed a comprehensive agreement on investment with European Union, but soon after Biden came into power, China take a very hard position on the conclusion and ratification of CAI. This explains when China feel the pressure, politically or economically, they would try to seek other cooperative partners. But I don't see. I do agree. China did this for its try to boost its economic growth, and especially the PRC want to assure the foreign investors they are still in a market reform mindset. But I think most Japanese investors, they have very serious doubt about this. And in terms of semiconductor, of course, Japan and South Korea are big countries. But as Professor Chen mentioned, the U.S. is trying to prevent these two countries from providing or aiding China in developing its own semiconductor industries. But at the same time, the semiconductor industry between South Korea and China, they are in fact they are in direct competition, especially in these DRAM industries and all these mature processing manufacturing foundries. So I don't see there's a possibility for, especially for China and South Korea to cooperate in semiconductor industries.
Professor Chen?
Let me add one more number here. So for South Korea, the biggest partner of trade export is now the U.S. The U.S. replaced China as the biggest trade partner for South Korea. And these phenomena appear in not only South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and many other countries. So I think China is indeed very nervous about this because we see a sharp decline of the foreign direct investment in China. We see a sharp decline of their export and sharp decline of their, all of the numbers are declining, and also does their general economic situation. So China does have the incentive to improve its relationship and also to, starting to talk with a free trade agreement is it's a good start for China to draw back to the economic issues. But just as geopolitical issues now is more important than the economic issue itself. So I don't think it will work for China.
Okay. International politics is often about alliance politics. So how should we interpret the occurrence of the China, Japan, South Korea summit less than 1 year after the U.S., Japan, South Korea summit? You mentioned some of those, in Shangri-La, which is another one where we saw the issue of Taiwan was brought up and also discussed. But what about the summit, right before this China summit? According to your information, also I wonder, do you have any kind of information about the U.S. public, how they view this China, Japan, South Korea summit? I know this is kind of difficult because the summit was not widely discussed, not even among the Taiwanese media, but help us on this.
I do not understand about how the U.S. public react to this because I think this may be too far away from their daily lives.
Yeah, the radar.
Yeah, and we do not have any public survey on this. So, however, we do see clear message from the U.S. officials. So there's a official email response by a spokesperson of the State Department saying that just as the United States takes steps to responsibly manage our relationship with the PRC, so do our partners and allies. That is, the U.S. do encourage other allies to have talks, negotiations, and hold this summit with China, because that will manage the conflict and lower the nervous atmosphere with China. So for the U.S., it's very important that they avoid any direct conflict with China. However, for the main theme of their national security strategy, still the competition. So you can still competing with China and still forming alliance with the U.S. and at the same time just manage that. You try to manage that to avoid any conflict. So I think that is the mindset of the U.S. officials. Do not conflict with that. And also we see that at the same time, 1 or 2 days later, the U.S., Japan, and the South Korea vice foreign minister met in Washington, D.C. So that is part of the institutions built up in the U.S., Japan, South Korea summit last year. So they institutionalized this and keep starting to have these regular meetings in different levels. So I think that will, the summit between Japan, China, and South Korea would not affect the existing mechanism of U.S. strengthening their ties with their allies.
So you're right that maybe President Biden, he is very happy or maybe at least positive about all kinds of alliances. Even some of them are related to China, but as long as that's like economic developments on both sides, it's a mutual beneficial things for both sides to do. Maybe nothing United States can complain about. Right?
Yeah, and also I think the U.S. is positive on this because before 1 or 2 years before, we see a lot of pressures from U.S. allies to pressure the U.S. to improve the relationship with China, to lower down the risk of a direct conflict. So I think everyone is happy about this because more talks, the more the better. You can exchange your ideas to lower the nervous atmosphere. So I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay. Given the significant depreciation of the Japanese and Korean currencies and the resulting economic stagnation, Japan's and South Korea's trade dependence on China ranks first at 20% and 21% respectively. Likewise, China's trade dependence on Japan and South Korea ranks second and third. Considering these factors, my question is that what are the tangible benefits of Japan, China, and South Korea restarting the negotiation for free trade agreements, so-called FTA, Professor Wu?
So basically, I have some doubts about the relationship between depreciation currency and staging and economics. In the past 5 years, we see the heavily depreciating Japanese yen, but we see Japanese stock has risen to historical record. So, and it's widely reported that Japanese is moving out. It hit the lost generations or the lost 3 decades. Actually, I don't see Japanese economic due to its depreciating currency. It has a relationship between the worsening economic. On the contrary, I think, especially it's even so when in South Korea, the South Korea currency, when it depreciates, it actually increases its competitiveness. This is the first point I want to make. And the second point I want to make is actually Japan, Korea, and China, they have already have a FTA, which is RCEP. Under the RCEP framework, they enjoy the free zero tariff or free trade area. So what's the purpose to add another FTA if RCEP is already a FTA? These 3 countries are trilateral FTA. Either they are deeper or they are wider, because we understand that the RCEP is not a deep and it's not a very deep FTA. So if the trilateral FTA is deep enough and wide enough, that it brings economic benefits towards these 3 countries. But in this context, the trilateral FTA, it has been talked about for decades, and it has not gone anywhere. And it is highly doubtful at this time, at this point, China is willing to commit. And if China commits, and whether China would abide by its commitments. So basically, this FTA talk is actually a talk. It eventually would not give rise to anything.
Okay, I have a different question for you, Professor Chen. Is that the meeting was part of efforts toward denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula. The Chinese delegation said it would support regional security and stability, but chose not say anything directly about North Korea. Of course, there's a stronger tie between China and North Korea. So what's your observation of this? How do you view China and the U.S. Varying approaches toward North Korea, since the United States has been condemning North Korea for making troubles from time to time?
Well, it's very easy that China just directly refuses to talk with or cooperate with the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. So they just keep doing business with North Korea, and also they are pushing for some cooperation between North Korea and Russians. So I do think that this kind of trilateral summit will be symbolic, going nowhere, including the security issues of the nuclear, and also including, just like as Professor Wu mentions, it was going nowhere about the FTA, because, well, China would just, they do not want the multilateral agreements. They just want to break through the alliance of the U.S. and to commit to some deeper bilateral relations. But for these difficult issues, they try to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. My final question for Professor Wu is that you just mentioned there was a meeting in Singapore between the United States and also China. And the delegation from both sides is U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and also the Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun. They saw both sides expressing their positions on the issue of Taiwan. Of course, that they blame each other. China said that the United States did not stick with the One China principle, whereas the United States expressed concern about the provocative PLA action in the Taiwan Strait. So what changes can be expected following this meeting regarding the issue of Taiwan, especially now Taiwan has had a new president?
I don't see any possibility of change from both sides. Okay, the PRC talk about One China principles, but the U.S. keeps saying One China policy. The PRC is asserted, self-asserted One China principles. That's not equal to U.S. One China policy. So basically, they are talking different sense. And for U.S., the territorial status of Taiwan is undetermined. And for the PRC, they see Taiwan as part of China. And they try to find a legal basis from UNGA 2758, which is legally unfounded. So basically, they just repeat their basic positions. I don't see any change on both sides would happen in the near future. One point I want to make is China has consistently distorted UNGA and other legal instruments to has the legal basis to serve the legal basis for its One China principle, which is legally unfounded. I think this is one point we have to worry at this time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Professor Wu and Professor Chen, thank you for the insights in the show. Like our show, subscribe to Taiwan Talks. See you soon.